welcome to Books of the Book. I'm John Pauline, and my colleague today is John Ciccarelli, and we're studying 1st and 2nd Thessalonians with you.
Yes, we've been following Paul along on his journey, and he has written some letters. It's been a bit of a rocky start. He's run into some trouble all along the way, but yet he's reaching out in his letters. And there's much to be learned, John, from outside the Bible. And today we're going to really look at the context of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians.
Mm-hmm. So he was just journeying through ancient Greece.
Right.
And he went on this journey because he had a dream. And the dream says, come over into this part of the world and help us. And sometimes God gives you a dream and you follow it and you get in trouble. Is that right? That ever happened to you?
Seems often the case. God always leads us to the places that are outside our comfort zones and places to bring down strongholds for the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in a future program we're going to talk more specifically about that, the times when people who are really serving the Lord, really faithful to the Lord, nevertheless go through some dark times.
Yes.
And if any of you are going through dark times right now, that's sometimes the way God leads you, because it can burn away some of those things that otherwise we would just cling to.
Right.
You know? Yeah. So today, I'm probably going to be doing too much talking, but the reason is today we're going into some deep background to the Thessalonian letters. And we're going into background beyond the Jewish background, but even to the Gentile background, because there's a number of things about the history of Thessalonica, about the practices in the ancient world that really help us to understand what's going on in this book and even in some other books of the New Testament. And people might ask the question, isn't it a waste of time to study about ancient paganism or ancient history? I just want to stick with the Bible. And I have every bit of respect for people who feel that way. But I think there's some reasons why you'll find this to be an interesting program. First of all, when Paul spoke to Gentiles, he spoke with a knowledge of their background. And he spoke to that background. He shaped the gospel in a way that they could understand. But second of all, when you know about the ancient background, you also know what Paul was fighting against. Because these doctrines, these religions, these backgrounds were pushing against the gospel and making it difficult for people to come to the gospel. And so as Paul is giving the gospel, he's giving it with a twist that battles against some of these false ideas. So in studying these things, we can find, I think, fruitful connections with what's happening in the text of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians that will help us as we go verse by verse through these books later on.
John, there's a text I think would be great for us to look at that really gives us an understanding of Paul's mindset, his strategy, if you will, in this situation.
Oh, read it to me.
It's from 1 Corinthians 9:20 through 22. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some.
So how do you understand that to be relating to what we've been talking about?
Well, I think Paul is showing that his number one focus is to bring the gospel to people, and he's going to do all he can to understand where those people are at, to make the message relevant to where they're at. He's going always seeking to understand before he's understood, and understanding the situation so that that gospel message can be made clear to them.
And I think one thing I'd add to that is in doing that, he's following the model of God. God himself seeks out to understand us and bring things to us just the way we need it. In order to meet someone where they are, you have to know where they are. And we see God doing that. For example, the New Testament. Scholars 150 years ago, they thought the New Testament was written in some kind of heavenly Greek. It didn't read like any other Greek in the ancient world, not the philosophers, not the government, not the scholars of the ancient world. So they said, this is unique. And then an archaeologist in 1896 stuck a shovel into a garbage dump from ancient times and found something they'd never found before. personal letters, bills, receipts, marriage contracts, the kind of stuff that people do every day. That was never preserved intentionally. You see, that was garbage.
Yeah.
But when we discovered it, you know what they found?
What?
It was the language of the New Testament. When God chose to speak to people in ancient Greek times, he spoke the language of the street. He met them right where they were. We see this happening in the 4 Gospels. There's only one gospel, really, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and yet there are 4.
Right.
Because God knows that different people, different mindsets need to hear the message in their own way. Even more exciting is the book of Daniel. In chapter 2, God speaks to King Nebuchadnezzar. He gives him a dream. What's the form of the dream? It's an idol. It's something he would recognize, something he would understand. But he gives essentially the same message to Daniel in chapter 7. But to the Hebrew prophet, it's the story of creation. A stormy sea, animals, a son of man who has dominion over the animals. That's the story of the Garden of Eden. You see, so God, even when he makes a dream, a vision, is shaping it in the form of the person who's receiving it. So I think that we see God, like Paul, meeting people where they are. Does that ever happen with your kids?
Oh yeah, you know, I have a boy and I have a girl, 10 and 12 years old, and so they're already different. You got to talk to them different, interact with them differently. You share that same message of your love to them, but differently. You know, my son is much more, when you show affection, it's let's wrestle, you know, let's play hard. And with my daughter, it's more like let's snuggle, Dad. You know, same affection, but just expressed in a different way.
That's right. Yeah, people often wonder why teenage boys are hard to deal with. Well, you probably just need to punch them in the shoulder or something, and then they say, "Oh, I'm loved now."
There you go. That's right.
See, but the girl, she'd be mad at you for weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
So missionaries call this the point of contact. It's that place where people are hungry for the gospel. It's they may not know it. They don't think they need the gospel. But there's a point where they feel a need, and when you touch that point of need with the gospel, then they're more likely to be open to the larger picture. Where do you see people meeting the gospel today? Because in the secular world, you know, it's kind of hard to reach them.
It is, but you know, there's still those times in life, times of change, are when people are really open to the gospel. Times when a child's being born, or someone dies, or someone's going through crisis. They don't have the answers because it's outside the norm. And you know, I can think of a story of a neighbor of mine that I had when I was living in San Diego, and at that time was doing a lot of surfing. And we would surf together, but he was not a believer.
You surf?
I know, but it's hard to believe. But and he never wanted to talk about religious things. He knew I was a pastor. But one day I get a call from him out of the blue. And someone at work died suddenly that day, and he left work. And I get this call on my cell phone saying, "Hey, can you go surfing?" And I dropped everything and went. And then he was open to the spiritual things. He was open, like, what happens when people die? What happens? Where's God in this? And we were able to talk about those things. But it's those key moments, the felt needs, when they need that.
All right, well, we're going to get to Thessalonica and some of the unique background that really unpacks where Paul's letters are going. But first, I'd like you to read a text out of the Gospel of John, because I think in Jerusalem, people were experiencing life much as the Thessalonians did. Would you read that text for us?
Sure. From John 11, verses 48 through 50.
Right.
If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation should perish."
So you see here in Jerusalem, they're dealing with occupation. The Roman Empire is occupying the city, occupying the territory, and they're struggling. What do you do with Jesus? If it hadn't been for occupation, maybe Jesus wouldn't have bothered them that much. But because of the occupation, they were afraid. Something's going to go wrong. The Romans are going to clamp down on us. We can't afford this kind of things going on. And when Rome came to Jerusalem, there were 4 basic reactions. One group was the accommodators, and we call them Sadducees. And these were people that said, well, this is what it is, so let's deal with it. Yeah. Let's get along, and then maybe one day when they're gone, we can do what we want to do. So the Sadducees were trying to make peace and if everything goes smoothly and so on. Then you had the passive resistors, the Pharisees. And they would smile at the Romans and they'd make nice and stuff like that. And the minute the Romans were out of sight, they'd be plotting, how can we do it the way we want to do? And, what can we encourage them to get out of here and so forth? They wouldn't fight or anything, but they were resisting in a passive way. Then you had the rebels, the zealots, and they were all, they were doing terrorism and stuff. Acts of terrorism, trying to mess up the Romans and discourage them from hanging around. And then you had the withdrawers, the Essenes, like the people who kept the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they just checked out. This is life here is just too much for us. We're going out in the desert, and everybody leave us alone. Yeah. So similar things happened in Thessalonica. Thessalonica was a free city. But they invited the Romans in about 200 years before Paul comes. Why? Because they were having fights with their neighboring cities. And they saw Rome kind of as the big brother who would take care of the bullies in the neighborhood. Right. So the Thessalonians invited Rome in. There was no war to conquer Thessalonica. And you say, all right, they're a free city under Roman rule. What could be better?
Good deal.
Occupation is still occupation.
Yeah.
And when you're occupied, you don't really make your own decisions in a real sense. They'll come and say, well, 20% of the crops, ship them to Rome. Those are taxes. But you didn't get consulted about those taxes. Somebody else decides that. So occupation, no matter how friendly it is never particularly a happy thing. And it brings along with it the sense of powerlessness and hopelessness. And it divided the people in Thessalonica. The rich people were good with the Romans, like the Sadducees. Hey, this is all right. They left us in power. We still got our wealth. We still got our mansions. So let's make the most of this. So the rich were happy. The poor people, they're the ones that suffered from the heavy taxes and from the oppression and the forced marches and all kinds of things the Romans were doing. So Thessalonica was divided over the Romans, just like Jerusalem was divided. And Paul walks into that situation of a city that's struggling,
Yeah. It's tough, especially as being Christians, sometimes just politics in the world, and sometimes at a local level with the city or a county, sometimes dealing. I've been in a building program myself, and it can be challenging, trying to do what you feel God is calling you to do, but then there's restrictions that you feel sometimes aren't always fair, There's benefits, but there's that tension, the tension that you live with.
So in a sense, being pastor of a church is almost like being in occupied territory sometimes.
Sometimes it is. Yes.
Yeah, wow. All right, well, that's beginning to set a foundation for Thessalonica and the stuff that was going on back then. And there was a very interesting religious movement going on in Thessalonica at the time that Paul came. Makes all the difference when you understand it. After the break.